Okay, everyone, welcome to the BDM. Yes, please. During this 12 o'clock hour, we're going to have these authors speaking, and in the reading lounge at 12:10, we're going to have Leonora Solomon, and at 12:35, Sunny Morgan is going to be interviewing Amy Barnes. Crush wants to thank the Sex Symbol Podcast for sponsoring today's panel. If you're looking for a couple ladies who know how to shake things up, these are your gals. Now, on to the fun. Okay, how's everybody doing today?
Fabulous.
Doing great. The first sessions were fun.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that. Hopefully, this one's going to be just as fun, if not better, actually. I think we're still waiting for Tiny. Maybe I should just like force her in here with my magic moderator powers. So we'll start with Lucky. We'll start with you first because it's always ladies first. I like to be different because that's not how I was raised, which is why I do it. What do you hope people take away from your stories?
I hope that they find themselves entertained, titillated, aroused, amused. But maybe oh, did I just get kicked off?
No, did you?
Oh, my screen just totally went blank. Oh, okay, I'm back. Yeah, technology, isn't it wonderful? Aren't you glad this didn't happen yesterday?
Right.
Oh my
Okay,
goodness.
continue.
Sorry, but yeah, what I hope people take away from my stories is that they're entertained, they're aroused, they're amused, and maybe they feel more comfortable with thoughts or feelings that they might have that aren't mainstream.
That's a great answer.
Thank you.
Ms. Bell?
Yes. From my stories, I try to, after there was so much backlash with 50 Shades about like, oh my gosh, like it really made a mess of people uh in their understanding of BDSM, but there was also the fact that so many people read it and were titillated and interested in it. I try to make sure when I present a scene or anything that they have to be entertained first, but if they are educated at the same time or educated enough to go look up things that they're interested in, that's my goal. I kind of, maybe it's because I was a school teacher for so long, but it's like I'm going to slide some education in there so you don't really know you're getting it.
That's very interesting. Like, and this isn't part of my script. Like, what is your favorite thing to educate in your stories?
Oh, it's funny. It always ends up being fucking spanking. Like it's always in there. And it's like, damn, it's so on brand, but I had a bunch of stories, but they got purchased by an erotica company that ended up folding, so they're not on my medium. But in those 20 stories, I had a lot of range. I did lots of different things, so I have to put more out on medium with bigger range because the ones on medium are all brat stories and it's all spanking.
That's great. Well, I do see Tiny has joined us. Tiny, same question to you. What do you hope people take away from your stories?
That they're horny. No, the BDS, I mean, I write in several different genres, but the BDSM genres, obviously, you've got the consent, you've got safe, sane consent, the SFP, and also, that you don't have to be an expert to get started. If you're interested, then you just go for a search on like Pet Life and give it a try. See if you can meet someone, start chatting, and sometimes you can just meet people in real life through the website, and then you can chat about everything before actually going for it. Say it like that.
All right, thank you so much. Those are good. Those are all unique. I love that. So I guess we will start with Tiny this time. Since we started with Lucky the first time, I'll go in opposite order this time. Do you live the lifestyle? And if not, do you have a professional you talk to about it when you're writing?
I live the lifestyle. There you go.
Do you
No,
want to elaborate?
I'm a submissive, and my husband, he's my dominant. We met 10 years ago. On the first date, it was, I don't know if you can say love at first sight is true, but BDSM at first sight, maybe something like that. Uh, um, you know, it was my start, which is kind of like in my book, Tina's story. And that one kind of evolves similar to how we met and how we evolved, because he was already in the scene for a longer time than I was.
Excellent. Ms. Bell?
Well, so I live it ish, like, right? Because
Ish.
it's hard, yeah, it's hard to live BDSM 24/7 when you have kids because you have to keep things like appropriate and different stuff. So awesome if other people can do it. I have not figured out how to do that. So we take sex vacations where we're more living our dynamic and things. I am a submissive, and I know it's super controversial, but uh my husband and I have a more DDLG kind of relationship, like daddy little relationship, and so we just take sex vacations to live our kink out in hotel rooms because you can't really do it at your house. But there are
Well,
subtle ways to live the lifestyle. So
thank you so much. Lucky. I mean, I know this answer, but they don't.
Sure. So yeah, absolutely. I write from real life, and not too long ago, just a couple of years ago, I found out with Miss that I was a switch. I never considered myself that before. And I've written some stories about it. If you want to read about what actually happens in real life, they're on Medium. But um, one day we were in bed and I was tickling her, and she decided that she didn't really like that, and she turned the tables on me and tickled me, and I really liked it. And she pinned me down with her thighs and went to town, and I never got off harder than being completely out of control. And that was kind of the beginning of it. Um, the kids are grown; they're out of the house. It's just the two of us, and so we can be spontaneous when we want to. And what's really cool about the way that we live the lifestyle is that we don't plan a scene per se or have a set dynamic. It's just flow in the moment.
yeah.
That sounds fantastic. So, with those lifestyle questions, have you found any, like, I know this isn't in the script, right? But you guys made me think. Um, do you guys find certain things easier to do versus harder?
Okay, so for me at least, so I live in Oklahoma, and people in Oklahoma think this is the deep South. It's not, it's the Midwest, but whatever. And so there are a lot of kind of it's very easy to be a more submissive woman, like in public, in to my husband. It's like no one bats an eye. In fact, I can call my husband daddy and no one says anything because a lot of people down here call their husbands that. So it's like there are things like I can do like that. I can wear a collar like this. I mean, I can't wear a full on like kitten collar or something. People would say something about that. But there's lots of things that I can do in my everyday life that are subtle to the DS dynamic, and or even the brat dynamic. But and and but it's the flow, right? Like Lucky said, you have to be aware of when and you do that.
Yeah, it's interesting here in Los Angeles. You could wear whatever, nobody would bat an eyelash.
Right.
I had an employee who showed up at work one day with a daddy collar on. Nobody said anything.
That's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
People here would lose their fucking minds. Thank you. Thank you, Lakin.
Did we
I'm
lose
not
our
sure if
Molly?
I'm supposed to answer any other questions.
Yeah, I was wondering
Okay, so
if we
I
lost the
was
host.
sitting here talking and I had my mute
Oh,
button on.
oh,
Uh-huh.
okay.
So I was like, nobody's listening to me. My bad. So as I was saying to myself, that was a great story about like Oklahoma versus California. Thank you for that dynamic and comparison. But with all that, are there any misconceptions that you think people have about BDSM writers?
Um,
Uh,
I think that some don't really believe that BDSM writers actually have the experience. I mean, you've
yeah.
got a famous book and movie, and I haven't seen it, I haven't read it, The Shades, but apparently they don't do BDSM justice because you have to do it justice to make them believe, and get into the story. There's a lot of people that say they learn from BDSM stories, even if they are erotic, even if they are
Yeah.
fantasy. They learn from that and then they realize what BDSM is supposed to be. But I don't know if people that themselves are new to BDSM, if they would know if an author is or isn't in the scene or has done his information search correctly or whatever. So I actually don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the misconceptions or what the even thoughts are of BDSM writers, but I think there are definitely some assumptions that readers make. Um, they assume usually one of two things: there's a male dominant with a female submissive,
Right.
or there's a dominatrix with a cut male sub, and the dynamic is so much wider and larger than that. So I think that's
I
a misconception.
Yeah. And I don't know, I mean, for you, Lucky, but as a woman BDSM writer, erotica writer, I mean, there's lots of like people just assume like you're a super slut, and it's like, well, I am, but in a very contained box. But the other thing is, I mean, if I was going to write a book about launching a rocket into space, like I would do my research and I would know what I was writing about. And I know not everybody does that, but I definitely do. So if I'm learning about something that I want to put in a book, like I'm researching the shit out of it. So it may not be the fact that like the misconception may be that like I'm just want sex all the time and all I do is lay around in my bedroom like a succubus trying to get dick. That's not true. I mean, it is true, but not in that, not from like random people. But I think people need to look at all authors as the fact that we're smart. Like that's where we're dangerous. Like we're smart enough to know a bunch of shit. So it's like I feel like the misconceptions are they just think you're a sexual being.
I think that's a good answer. That makes sense on a lot of ways because they probably think like, how could you write if you don't experience?
Right.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people who assume that a female author in the scene, like she said, is a slut or open to everybody, and they don't understand that it's a partner dynamic.
Right.
And it may be a partner dynamic with a third,
Mhm.
or in a club or a dungeon or things like that. But it's not something that is just open to everybody you interact with. And I think that's a common misconception as well.
Oh yeah. And
Do you,
that
do
I
you
think
think?
go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, I just I I think people don't understand how much work BDSM is because really all of us just see the ESPN highlight reel and in like whether it's porn, whether it's erotica, a book, short story, whatever, those are still like the fairy tale, the highlight reel, the good parts. You don't see people like negotiating a BDSM contract for a while. Like you don't see people uh safe wording very much. You don't see these things. So people just, I think people just take it on the surface. And so they, all of their misconceptions are because nobody goes deeper.
That's actually about what I was about to segue and ask. Do you think part of the misconception can be like what 50 Shades is always referenced, but that contract part? Do you think people think that's a real part of the dynamic and how important that is?
I think it
Um,
depends on what their source is, right?
yeah.
Like, how important is that? Like, it was seemed to me when I watched that and read it, it wasn't as super important as it probably should have been. But I don't live the lifestyle. Like, so people who live the lifestyle, is that part important to you guys?
Not
It depends.
necessarily, because if you talk, just chat about everything, have a real conversation about what will happen, what might happen, and what you both want to happen, that should be more than enough. That you don't have to like sign a contract, and some do. I mean, then you get the bullet points, and then you just tick what you want to try, and what you definitely don't want. But having a regular conversation can do exactly the same thing. Well, that's my experience.
I also think it depends on if you're with your partner and how long you've been with your partner. Like I
Hmm.
see all these young people on Twitter, they're just like, wait, in fact, I had a conversation with someone the other day. It was like, we have these like 18-year-old submissives on there with these DOMs, and they're all like, yes, I have 10 years of experience. And I'm like, you're fucking 18. And so if you go to a club, if you, there are, you can go like to watch. There's someone there that can, a lot of times, if you go to a good club and really vet them, there's someone there, if you are new to BDSM, that can help you. There's munches, there's different things. I just think on a whole, the society is kind of lazy about stuff. And so they're like, yeah, I'm totally a dom because I spanked my wife in the bedroom. And I'm like, bro, no, no. Or they use it as a way to abuse each other. And I think like, I don't think a written contract is like the end all be all. I think it depends on who you're with. But I know I've been married to my husband 21 years, and there are things it's like, no, we're gonna have to talk about this and have a real negotiation. And I'm a super nerd, so it's like maybe I need to print something off because I want to make sure that we have a conversation and hit all of the things that could be a problem later on. Like, maybe my hard limit is no emotional attachment to the other person if we decide to have a threesome. Like, there's so many things that people don't think about because in pop culture, it's like, no, you just find a girl at a bar and then y'all go and fuck and it's amazing. And then it's like, oh, no, it never happens that way.
True.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. The next question that we had is, can you tell us the responsibilities that DOMs have for their subs and vice versa? Lucky.
Caring.
Let's start with Lucky. Let's start with
Sure.
Lucky.
I think because of, especially with the switch dynamic, I think I've become much more aware of it, and that is you need to be really, really tuned into your partner, whichever position you're in. Um, you need to be aware of their feelings, their limits, are they enjoying themselves? Do you need to push harder? Um, you know, uh, it needs to be a give and a take, like I said before. And I think that that responsibility is in constant communication. A lot of times that communication might just be eye contact, changes in breathing. Um, if it is a safe word, there's always that as well. Um, but realizing at the end of the day, the two of you or three of you or what it may be are there for pleasure, for a good time, for mutual enjoyment, and not because you want to specifically be dominating somebody, or specifically because you want to be there being submissive, but that it's a group dynamic and you need to be really aware of that. And I think, that goes into aftercare as well.
Yeah. I
Tiny?
also think, oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Sorry.
no, go ahead.
I just am a talker and I'm putting my hand over my mouth. But so, the three tenets of BDSM is it safe? Is it sane? Is it consensual? And one of the reasons that I really, really like BDSM, and I think a lot of neurodivergent people or autistic people, I myself am autistic, if we fall into it, is because it has these very strict rules of engagement, and it takes some of the guesswork out of it. There is a checklist I can go down and I can ask things. But BDSM to me is like if you were in a team sport and you were rowing down the river and you were trying to win a race, or you're a team and you were climbing Mount Everest, you would pay attention to the people on your team, like, oh, this person needs more oxygen, oh, this person may need like a energy bar, this, but you're so very aware of the people on your team to accomplish these goals. And that's, I think, kind of what, if you're going to be in some kind of scene or in the BDSM dynamic, regardless if you're a dom or you're a sub, you have to pay attention to the things around you because you're both trying to accomplish this goal. Now, there are times as a sub where you can like totally let go,
Mm.
but it's also your responsibility after the scene is over to be able to think about it and advocate for yourself if something is wrong.
And like you were saying before, like you've been with your partner a really long time, or your husband, and I've been with my partner a really long time. And so there's already this established, we know what the hard limits are. Nobody has an interest
Right.
in crossing that line. Even if you're pushing in a moment, there's things that we know are just absolutely not. And
Right.
so you don't have to have a contract or a moment in that, but the check-ins are still great. Is this still good?
Mm-hmm.
Do you need a break? Things like that. And I really liked your hiking analogy. That was great.
Oh, thanks.
Tiny?
Well, I actually agree with both other authors, to be honest, because I'm a sub, so I have no experience being a dominant, which Lucky Love does, of course. And the one thing that I can only add is that as a sub, you can let go, as Peter said, but afterwards you have the aftercare. And then you have to check in with your partner, who's the dominant, who actually has to do a lot of work checking to see if you are all right, if he's doing everything right. He constantly checks your body language and everything. But you have to make sure that afterwards he's all right as well.
Right.
So that's all I can add.
Yeah, it's interesting having gone from just considering myself dominant to that, like just in the moment, having become a switch and kind of really pursuing that later. Um, Discovering that feeling of just letting go and totally not being in control, and that subspace of not thinking and just being is amazing.
The last question that Sunny and I prepared is, what do you think most people find appealing about this lifestyle? Let's start with Vida.
Okay. So just so y'all know out there, my name is Vida Carey, and
Oh,
but
sorry,
Layla,
in my
no,
head.
it's fine. It have, but Layla Bell is what I write like under, and so that's if y'all wonder. So, but on the podcast, everybody knows my name, so all my shit's out there on the internet. But I think, okay, this is gonna sound silly. Can you ask the question again?
Yeah, yeah. What do you think most people find appealing about this
Oh, okay.
lifestyle?
I think it is the other, right? Everybody is always attracted to this otherness. Like the kinky sex is what brings people. It's like, oh, like
Mm.
I may only be super vanilla with lights off and the covers on in the bedroom, but I'm very intrigued by whatever it is, tickling, spanking. Um, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm so kinky, I have anal sex. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of down on the list, but sure, okay. But it's anything that is more than what you do, because people are always, they always want to ride the bigger roller coaster.
It's funny you say that, and that was sort of before I got into this world. My slippery slope into it was, hey, one of the things I always tell Miss Lucky is, I'm like, I like different. I like new and different and variety. And, um, you know, there was a point at some point long before we had this Dom sub sort of thing going on where she had a strap on and she wanted to try it out, and I was game.
Mhm.
And you find things out about yourself, and that power reversal was amazing.
Yeah.
Heidi, do you have anything
Yeah,
you want to add?
well, I don't know about what other people find interesting. I guess exploring sex into a different direction, taking it into, some people say, dangerous direction, which it isn't. But that is what people are looking for. It's something different, something that makes it better for us people that have experience with BDSM, is that it is different, that we need that extra bits to get to a high point, that we need that in our lives to live it fully. I mean, it's maybe a bit strange to say it like that, but I think that is what attracts most people about the lifestyle, is that otherness, that more, that extra, that challenging, and also the love that goes with it.
Yeah, make a great point. That's something we hadn't really talked about too, is the positive emotions that go with all of this, and the
Hmm.
the way it brings you closer to your partner, and all of the things that happen afterwards, all the things that happen beforehand of a scene. Um, it does bring you closer. It really challenges you to improve your communication, to be aware of your partner and how they're feeling, to take care of each other, whether or not you're in the scene at all. But yeah, that's a really great point too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do agree. I think a relationship, I've always actually said that a relationship within BDSM is better than a vanilla relationship, because you talk all the time. You have those difficult conversations about your feelings, whereas other people might hide it. Within the BDSM lifestyle, you actually have those conversations. You have to, because otherwise you're not going to get to the point where you find the ultimate joy, to say it like that. But feelings is what you need to talk about within a relationship, within a loving relationship. But BDSM, then again, is sometimes not loving. It's just looking for that extra, I don't know, pizzazz or whatever. And then there is no sex involved. There is no love involved. That's just people looking to challenge themselves. And that is something that I don't get in the BDSM world. For me, it is with the love, with the connection, with everything to do with it. But it does exist as well. That's why you have female DOMs that do it professionally, for example, that does not have the love side to it, but it still has the BDSM side.
I think that's all very interesting. I am out of pre-planned questions, but I would like to open it up to the audience. I know there's some people reading that aren't in it and are in it. Is there any questions that you guys would like to ask?
Yeah, Phoebe's got one in the chat.
Hmm.
Oh, okay, let's see. Do you have a preference for partner meeting in BDSM club dungeon versus meeting in the real world?
Uh, okay, for me, and I've had this conversation with lots of subs before. You have to be so careful, and I think people are not in this, like, okay, you just have to be so careful whether you meet someone in the real world or a dungeon, right? We don't know people. We don't know who's crazy and who's not. And I want you to be safe, whatever you do. I don't want you to end up in a bathtub full of ice, right? So,
Oh my gosh.
whether you're meeting someone there or in the real world, uh, I do think that depending on the club or the dungeon, oh, in fiction, well, in real life, depending on the club or dungeon, I think there's more safety things in place for you. In fiction, I mean, it's whatever you want because it's your fairy tale, right? Like, you just, like, I can have two people meet at the coffee shop and they're like perfectly aligned DNS, or like, it doesn't matter. It's whatever you want to happen.
It's funny you said that. I have a storyline like that in one of my stories where a cut queen and a hot wife meet in a line in a Starbucks.
Yeah.
Sounds like the beginning of a
Tell
joke,
us
but it's
more.
it's the beginning of the story. Yeah, so in the story was actually inspired by a podcast did podcast interview I did with Kyle Cannon. He's a photographer and an author as well, and he likes to take pictures of his wife with other men. And that kind of got my juices turning because my partner likes to see me with other women. And so I wrote this story on Medium called "Fucking the Photographer's Wife" about the two women meeting in line at Starbucks and saying, "Hey, you know what? Why don't we all four get together and he can take pictures, she can watch, and the two of you can get together." And that's a fun story. And yeah, in fiction, everybody seems to play well nicely together and immediately hit it
Yeah.
off. Um, and it's easy to do that on paper, right? Because you don't have real life dynamics. But when you get to real life, just like Vita was saying, it's a real crapshoot who somebody really is behind the facade they put up. So
Right.
yeah, fiction makes it so much easier.
That was an excellent question, whether fictional or reality. Does anyone else have any other questions? There's a lot of people in here. I'm sure we can come up with some. Let's see. All right, who is this addressed to, Jesse? Or is it addressed to anybody? Okay, everyone. We'll start with Tiny. Have you written a character who has a history of mental illness and battles the urge to harm themselves?
I have, but not within the BDSM style. It's actually a story that is kind of based on my life as well. It is sexy, but it doesn't have BDSM in it. I mean, he is a little bit dominant, but not the bound and blindfold and whatever else you have. So, yeah, mental illness, not self-harm. I have to say that one is not included.
Yeah, for me, I tend to go very much the other direction. I've got maybe 100 stories on Medium, and the common thread through all of them is that they all have some element of positivity to them. There isn't, I don't do dark fiction. I don't do transgressive really so much. Um, for me, I'm a total hedonist. So everything is about pleasure and joy and experience.
Um, for me, I don't. Okay, my characters are generally always super neurotic overthinkers, and I really just I made this post the other day. It was a joke because like my mom won't listen to the podcast and she won't read my short stories because she says they're too biographical. Because most of those characters in my short stories, the women are me. Like that's how I think about shit. So, I guess yeah, I mean, I write mentally ill characters all the time. But no, none of my characters self-harm. I haven't ever delved into that. And I think that only because I want to do it justice. I want to make sure that if there's someone out there that reads it that relates to it, like we definitely don't want to promote self-harm, or I think you have to address it, especially in a story, well. Address it well or don't do it at all because there are people out there that need that.
Um, Perneat, I'm sorry, I said the name wrong. She had a question. So she can unmute and ask her question.
Thank you. I had a question and then I changed my mind and I changed my mind again. This is incredible, you guys. My question is BDSM is role play BDSM among the most popular kinks, I believe, amongst Americans. But I also see such a huge double standard in people actually talking about it publicly. Americans, or maybe others too, but my research is mostly just on Americans, privately admit that they're really into it, but publicly will not talk about it, admit it, or actually actively diss it. Is that your experience as well? What do you see as authors?
Uh, as an author, as a content creator, as just an American woman, like 100% yes. Americans do not talk about sex well. They don't. And I think like you have a lot of podcasts, you have a lot of shows on Netflix and stuff like that, but it's never like the real life conversations about sex. I feel like even the ones that are trying to make it more accessible are still kind of clinical. That was one of the reasons we started the podcast to begin with, is because people needed to have real conversations about sex. Like there is a whole like in Harry Potter, right? There's the Half-Blood Prince, like Harry finds the book and it states this is the way you do this potion, but there's these notes on the side like no, you need to stir it left once and do this. So I feel like no one wants to do that thing. No one
Hmm.
wants to People want to have a book conversation about sex, like a clinical conversation about sex, but nobody wants to say like sometimes when you have anal sex, it hurts. And if it does, you need more lube and you need to do this. Like, no one wants to just
Yeah.
outright say it because people get all like puritanical about it. It's like, oh, we can't say that out loud. And it's like, why? And I've always been that person that's just like, well, this is how you do it, and blah, blah, blah. So, oh, I do. I think it's a kind of an American construct to not talk
Yeah,
about
it's
sex.
funny you say that. I read an article on Medium today about how the Dutch handle the sex conversation better than Americans. And it was
Wow.
really enlightening because I don't really have the perspective of how other cultures view things, but I do know that, Americans definitely have this large portion of the country that is very, like you said, puritanical and wants things
Mm.
to be behind closed doors. They don't speak about it, don't talk about it. I've got a best friend who, if I said to him, "Hey, we had sex last night," he'd be like, "Dude, I don't want to hear about that."
Right.
And wouldn't even have to go farther than that. Versus, there are other people who would be like, "Oh, really? What was the dynamic? And did you have fun? And what did you do? And were there toys involved? And who got tied up or whatever it might be?"
Right.
But yeah, I think in general, Americans um, have this behind closed doors, don't talk about it mentality, and I think it comes from his history of religious upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Do you, so I'm guessing the popularity of BDSM works has gone up quite a bit. What's your perspective on where that's coming from? I'm guessing it's a generational shift, or is it not?
I mean, I think that I do think some of it is a generational shift because we have these, like I said, these young people that are like, oh, I'm a dom, I'm a sub, and they're like 18, 16.
Right.
I mean, even kids in middle school, and I'm like, Jesus. But, there is this push of these kids to like, to push the limits of sex. So I do think there's more of this generational shift to go that way. I think the thing that we really have to do and that it's really right for is we have to make sure that they have the knowledge to protect themselves. Like I'm
Yeah.
people are getting more open about sex, but it's this weird push-pull in the United States. Like you have tons of people that are like, you can't talk about sex and they get canceled, or women need to know their place and a lot of stuff. And then you have this huge push on the other end of it. It's like they want to wear their collar to work. They want to do this stuff. So I just think Americans are super confused.
Yeah.
Ellie made a great point in the comments in the chat that I was gonna say is I think technology has brought it into this next level where people can communicate on social media, whether they're anonymous or themselves. And there are apps and there are websites. There's FetLife and there's even just the way we interact on Twitter, where people can feel really comfortable being open because they're behind a screen.
Right.
And if we were all sitting in a room, would everybody feel just as comfortable talking about it? And it's a really great point. And I think that the reason we see this shift now in this generation is technology is a big piece of that. And the sharing of videos and audios and stories electronically. Whereas before you wanted to read a small story, you had to go buy penthouse letters.
Yeah. But I think
mean,
that,
so
like, you
I'd
hit
like
on
to
it, right?
take a, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you hit the nail right on the head, you guys, like, because look at the huge push in erotica. Like, there is an end cap with monster fucking at Barnes and Noble. So it's like, it's just getting more prevalent. It's just, how do we have the conversation?
So I need to pause real fast and let everybody know the fourth scavenger hunt word is invisible. Invisible. So if you are taking notes, that's your fourth one. And this is a 4-minute warning. So maybe we have time for one more question. If anyone has it.
Hey,
Lots of
Skylar.
stuff going on in the chat. Yeah.
Skylar, if no one has a question, I have a PSA, public service announcement, but I'm going to wait.
All right. Okay, so Vivian says, what is your favorite kink? And it jumped, the chat jumped. And do you incorporate your kink in your writing? So let's make them real quick. Tight answers if you have them. Let's start with Tiny.
Oh, I put it in the chat already.
Well, I didn't see it, sorry.
Bondage, impact play, and doggy style sex. And yes, it's in every BDSM book that I have written.
Vida?
So I like to impact play. I like a soft doms that will like take care of you after they have fucked you within an inch of their lives. And and I like sensory play, so that ends up a lot in my stuff.
Lucky?
Sir, could you repeat the question?
No, I gotta find it. I cannot. Hold on. 1 second.
My ADD
Something about your
kicked in.
kinks. Your kinks. Oh, what is your favorite kink and do you incorporate it in your writing?
Oh yeah, I answered it in the chat. Yeah, tickling.
Oh.
I absolutely adore being tickled. It gets me going like nothing, and I do write about it. I actually have started one of the words that I put in for a hundo was tickling, and I've started another story on that to submit also to Crush Pub. But I had no idea, like, it just overloads my senses and immediately like flips that switch for me. So I do like writing about it.
I cannot imagine that turning me on. Okay.
Neither could I.
To each their own, and that's the beauty of it. And I love that we can all be here and we don't have to have our faces shown because we can be private and anonymous, and we have that opportunity. So, okay, you had one last thing you wanted to say or ask as a reader?
Oh, pardon me?
Yeah.
Okay, so real quick, I actually just, and Skylar, you know this from the other breakout, I just finished a very, very comprehensive research on all things erotica and romance, mostly erotica and kinks. And I haven't analyzed it yet. I just haven't had time. But basically, who's into BDSM by race, age, orientation, identity, like all that good stuff. Really, really good information. I just have not gotten to it. So drop me a note if anyone's interested, and I'll make sure once, I've nailed it down, I'm able to share it with you.
In the chat, they're asking for the scavenger hunt word again is invisible. But thank you all so much for participating. So in conclusion, thank you for being with us. The next panel is going to be the transgressive erotica noir. And then at 1:10, we have Des Sweet in the reading lounge. So take a note of that scavenger hunt word, add it to your collection. If you need the link, let me know and I'll put it back out there. We have our giveaway starting at 4:45 Central Time. You have to be present to win. And when you're leaving the breakout room, please make sure you leave the room and not the meeting. And thank you all so very much for joining us. And I appreciate having all of you here.
Skylar, thanks for doing
Thank you,
this.
guys.
Thanks
That
for the
was awesome.
invite. It was a lot
Thank
of
you so
fun.
Yeah.
much.
It's a really cool idea. And I'll see you all
So
on the
glad to have
timeline.
you. Yeah. See you guys in the next rooms.